pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and myself, Kevin Laramee. We are joined on the line today by Stephen Sandor of the11.ca. Stephen, what an eventful Monday. Well, actually, Tuesday once again.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? We were just joking before we went on air about what could we possibly want to be talking about today. But really, it's eventful but not surprising, is it? I mean, I think we all knew this was coming the second that the USSF said that there would be no Division II sanction for NASL next year, that the lawyers were going to get involved. I mean, this was always, I mean, anyone I spoke to said this was always going to be the end game as soon as this process started. And that's why I think some were surprised that this process began, because I think a lot of people thought the USSF was going to let this sort of sit for a couple of years until after World Cup qualifying, until after the World Cup bid went through the final FIFA process, and then deal with it after that. I think there was surprise that this process began, because now, you know, the courts are going to get involved, and I think that's how everyone always knew the relationship between NASL and USSF was going to end.
No doubt, and it's always been a contentious relationship between NASL and many bodies, really, but the USSF being primary amongst them. Look, I guess the best way to start with this is having looked at the complaint, Stephen. What is your take in terms of the probability of its success?
To me, their probability of success isn't about winning in court, and I don't believe that's what they're after. I think NASL has a couple of end games here. One is this forces USSF into a legal corner. I think USSF, we know in the past, USSF and Major League Soccer are pretty well undefeated when they go to court, or they've had to deal with these sort of issues. But I think what it does do is it forces them to a hill now. And they're saying, okay, you've now said that the standards are this, and you keep changing the standards and moving the goalposts. That's what NASL's claim is on sanctioning. Well, now you said no. USL now in a month is going to have its sanctioning reviewed. If USSF were now to grant USL lots of waivers, they now give NASL legal ammunition, if you understand what I'm saying. So basically, I think what NASL has done is said, all right, by us suing, now we're forcing you to find a hill and stay on it. And that means you may have to tell some USL teams, look, you can't operate as Div 2 next year, or you're not that standard. Because now if you grant waivers, you're giving us legal ammunition. Between that idea that it's a prejudicial process, that you're picking and choosing winners, but you're playing favorites. I think that's the first goal of this lawsuit, is to basically put the USSF into a situation where it's now got to take the standards. The second goal, and I believe the longer term goal, is the timing of this. The fact that NASL decided not to wait, they decided to do this before the U.S. has their key World Cup qualifiers coming up, as the World Cup bid keeps going forward, is eventually, maybe if they yell loud enough, they're going to get CONCACAF's attention and FIFA's attention. And we know about Article 17. Article 17 and FIFA statutes say that there's no third-party interference in the affairs of domestic soccer. Now, that's not activated just by suing someone, because then everyone would sue everybody to get a federation in trouble. But if the federation actively engages this lawsuit, whereas they're going to turn this to a drawn-out process, I think the hope on one side is that all of a sudden FIFA and CONCACAF, at first CONCACAF's going to say, well, wait a sec, guys, we got a World Cup bid here, fix this now. Fix this without involving the court system. And then eventually, if that doesn't work, they'll go all the way up to FIFA, where FIFA will say, wait a second, are you guys, running into Article 17 issues here? And is there going to be any repercussions there? So to me, this isn't about legal precedent as much as it is a big game of chicken that's happening right now. And that's the way I feel about it. I think legally, it's pretty hard for a league to argue when it's lost so many teams, and that it has, it's gotten waivers pretty well every year it's existed. That being said, I do think at the long run, as a Canadian watching this from over the border, even though FC Edmonton is a team in NASL, so it's not that far removed, I should never make it seem that way. But I think we just, as Canadians now, more and more, we just sort of look at what they do in the States with soccer, and we just shake our heads, and we just cover our eyes and go, oh, here we go again. Wouldn't it be fun if we actually talked more about like kicking a ball than we did about like federation issues? But Americans love that stuff, it seems.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to cover NASL for a lot of the reasons you outlined, because there is so much instability with it that it almost seems like the competition is secondary, as you say. And we've tried. I mean, we've done a lot of stuff over the years, particularly as it relates to Ottawa and Edmonton when they were in the league. But Stephen, we'll get back to the Canadian issues in a minute. But look, when you read the complaint, there is an element of conspiracy theory to it. So I'm going to ask you, from your perspective of someone who's watched the league pretty closely, how much accuracy is there in some of the claims that are out there? I'm not suggesting they're going to win this, because I believe, as you do, that the antitrust argument's probably going to fail ultimately if they were to take this to as far as they could. But in terms of some of the claims that are made, is there truth to them?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think, like a lot of things, I think there is definitely, let's face it, Miami FC is right now in the Court of Arbitration for Sport, are trying to get that to hear a pro-rel argument, obviously, at the same time. In the case of Miami FC and the New York Cosmos, I really do believe the USSF has an agenda here, and a lot of the other people in U.S. soccer do. I think there's no doubt about with those two teams, especially I think maybe more Miami FC now than New York Cosmos, to make their lives difficult, or force them at least into a corner where they don't operate in the way that they do, which is as in full on devil may care, we run things our own way kind of clubs. They make it almost impossible. Basically they if you ever want to do a straight merger and merge NASL into the other part of the US system, they almost make it impossible by the way that they operate, because you would, maybe in Miami FC, if they were ever in USL, and some people do see USL as MLS's minor league, you would have, arguably a minor league team that spends more than quite a few MLS clubs, which would be odd. So in those cases, I think, there's definitely an argument. I think their argument, though, that a lot of teams left because of the sanctioning issue is not true. I think some teams left because they went out of business. And I think, you go to business, you go to business. And honestly, I find at least, and I'm speaking from the Edmonton example, no one in Edmonton talks about Division 2 or Division 3. Like, no one cares. No one cares at all. They care about having a team to watch on Saturday or Sunday and having a team to play against and being able to go out and watch some soccer and have a beer. That's what they care about. As it should be, kind of, if you think about it that way. They just want to watch good level soccer and enjoy a couple of hours. The fact is, I don't think that a lot of people openly think about this kind of stuff when they buy tickets to go to a game. I think some of those things are issues that are bigger. These crisis issues are things that everyone in minor league soccer faces, which is how to get people to the stadium, how to engage fans, and how to do things. I think some of the business decisions NASL made were obviously things that were destructive for the league. They had some good ideas. They had some bad ideas. They didn't have a lot of people pulling in a lot of the same directions a lot of time. But actually, the funny thing is, I think a lot of their worst decisions weren't because of their independence. I think a lot of their worst decisions were made when they decided to get together and try to do things more unified. That together they made some bad decisions. I think broadcast deals are one that really hurt them, with national broadcast deals that forced teams to take games off local outlets and put them on so-called national carriers that a lot of fans didn't get. So that to me was a big sort of national groupthink decision that hurt the league than some of the independent stuff. But honestly, I have some issues with things. I mean, I think the league had a couple of its more rogue members, and what I mean, because it wasn't just Miami and the Cosmos. Before that, it was Minnesota and Tampa Bay as well. And yet Minnesota and Tampa Bay kind of looked back and washed their hands of everything, saying, oh, we didn't escalate salaries. We didn't do this thing. When in fact, Minnesota at one time was spending more than the Cosmos before they left for MLS. And they were just as damaging to that NASL kind of spend. Yet there seems to be a holier than thou attitude that comes from them about where NASL is now, which really bothers me because I think it's absolutely hypocritical. Because they were just as escalating everything as the Cosmos were. Tampa Bay, obviously, they had their legal issues with Fort Lauderdale and floating them, Bill Edwards giving money, and obviously, wanting to be paid back and then successfully suing the league for basically nothing because there was nothing left of Fort Lauderdale after that team went bankrupt. So, there's lots of issues. I mean, you could ask the Ottawa Fury why they left, and they probably have a laundry list of issues why they left, and I don't know if a lot of that has to do with Division 2 or Division 3. But at the same time, I do think that there's a frustrating process in when a federation arbitrarily decides who's Division 1, 2, and 3 in a system where there's no movement. I mean, if you ask me particularly how do I feel about this, Steve, I'd say any federation where there's no pro relegation, and I'm not wanting to be a pro relegation truther, this is just a matter of fact. There doesn't need to be divisions. Why does there need to be divisions? Just sanction these leagues, let them play. I don't understand that why you need to differentiate. Just let them promote themselves and let the players play because you're not moving teams up and down. So why is there this need to categorize everything? I don't understand it. I get that you need to have some standards in place for teams to be successful to make sure that you don't have the bankruptcies like you used to have in lower division soccer in North America. But at the same time, you can do that in different ways without having to pit leagues against each other and turn they've turned that culture toxic. When people are cheering for people to lose jobs and for teams to fold, that's a toxic situation to me. I don't care what league it is. I would never cheer for a team to fold and for people to be put out of work. I mean, I would think that, and I've said this, that, if you're cheering for the NASL to go to business and people lose their jobs, is it okay if those people come back and cheer on Twitter the day you lose your job? Is that cool? Because maybe that would be cool. That's sort of a fair comeuppance.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Stephen. When I look at the situation right now, you mentioned why is that label important, and I have to agree with you. Technically, it doesn't change anything. Let just leagues be leagues, and in the Open Cup, you see who was the best, and that could be a possibility. But when you're looking at a corporate perspective, a sponsor perspective, in North America, the difference of dollar signs, the money in first divisions, if you're looking at the top 4 sports and Major League Soccer compared to the other ones, make a big difference. And I've seen it in my own city and others where second division or second leagues in sports trying to come into town, and it never gets the attention and the sustainability and the visibility that a branded number 1 league does. And I think it has to do with that aspect. It's just, are we the actual brand of most important soccer, and we deserve to be followed? And if we're not first, we want to be second because there's third and fourth, and we're more important. I think it's just a corporate way to make sure that the sponsors know that you're sponsoring the top product or the second to best product.
I would argue, though, Kevin, that happens organically.
Yeah.
People don't need to be told that MLS is Division 1. People know that by the fact that MLS has more fans, more teams in larger cities, more of a following, better TV deal. They don't need to be told it's division. No one needs to be told that the NHL is better than the AHL or the ECHL. No one needs Hockey Canada and USA Hockey to come down with distinctions. No one needs to be told that Major League Baseball is a better brand of baseball than other leagues. I think that would have happened anyways. People would have recognized that MLS is the more powerful league, and that's the league you want to gravitate to. I don't think that fans need to go like, oh wow, the USSF sanctioned this, because honestly, on our side, Canada Soccer doesn't care. They've said over and over they don't care. They're only going to start caring about this stuff when the Canadian Premier League starts, and then they're going to worry about the division stuff as it regards to the Canadian Premier League. But they say right now we have a national championship that has all 5 teams, USL, NASL, and MLS, all lumped together. Yes, the MLS teams do get seeds. How that goes on next year when the tournament expands, we'll see. But the fact is, they see that every team gets a chance to compete for that championship, and that's the end of it. And whether the American system, which litigation heavy, has become so bogged down in semantics and paperwork. It is really become, as I said, such a toxic situation where it's just like as soon as you see, NASL suing USSF, please let's turn off Twitter, because you just have a hard time just dealing with the kind of negativity. I mean, you have people in the States, you've seen this, who are cheering against their national team because they hope that it somehow brings change to their system that some people feel is so overtly corrupt and other people feel is, benefits one over the other. And I mean, when you create that system where you have a large number of fans cheering against your national side, like, holy cow, and I just worry about the spillover. I think sooner or later, we're so close to it. We're in this bid with them for the World Cup. I think at some point, this is why, and it gets back to the next point where, I used to think about the divorce proceedings being more amicable when Canada Soccer and U.S. finally split up their systems. But I think now, that the walls maybe need to be a little bit higher between the nations in terms of how we run our system to sort of, stay away from that.
When you look, Stephen, at the sport, soccer, in the United States, is it taken hostage by the U.S. Soccer Federation and a whole? Is basically, to go back to the point you just made, is soccer taken hostage by lawsuits and paperwork in the United States?
Yeah. Well, don't get me wrong. Every nation needs to have a strong federation that sets rules for everyone to live by. It needs to be able to set the rules for competitions in its country. It needs to be able to set rules that make sure that fly-by-night investors don't just come in and then fold a team up a month in because they didn't realize that it was going to take that kind of effort to maintain the soccer club. At the same time, I think that the American process has become so drawn out, so soap operatic, so politically charged that it's all with the fact that that it has really become a battle of ideologies between the way certain leagues are run. And I mean, this is a product of the fact that and I think now, if you look back at this is all probably the mid-90s when no one in the United States wanted to invest in soccer on a serious level. And the only way it was going to happen, and I understand, this is the only way it was going to happen, was an exceptionally cost-controlled groupthink environment. And that's how MLS started. And because that's the way that MLS began, as the only real way that soccer was going to grow in the United States, that now that's become the standard. And now that soccer is a much bigger business and has more, at least what people see as viability, when people want to come in and go through the independent model, it now has become a battle of ideologies. And it should never have been that way, but that's the way it was. I mean, in a perfect world, and I will say in a perfect world, in the 1990s, you would have had investors lined up in the United States or European investors lined up to invest in soccer in the United States that would have started an independent system, and you wouldn't have the problems you have now, but they didn't. And the fact is, to get soccer started, you needed to have a model like MLS. I get that. And so now, this was, honestly, I think now you look back in the mid-90s, and if you could look at a crystal ball, you say, well, of course this was how it was going to end up. Of course this is how eventually this was going to play out, that you'd have MLS eventually grow, soccer would gain a foothold. Then you'd have the independent investors saying well, no, we want to do this our way. We don't want to be part of the MLS group system. And there would eventually be a cultural clash between them. And so now the USSF has to referee, and that's the hard thing. I mean, it is really difficult to be in that system because now, this is a really difficult thing because they're trying to catch up with their legislation and catch up with their standards because the rules have been bent before and rules have been and waivers have been granted to make everybody happy, and now this is what in the end you're reaping this whirlwind, and this is the only way it was ever going to end up is in court. And I think it's going to, it's an ugly process. And it's a sad thing because the fans have been dragged into it and they get really vitriolic about this kind of stuff.
All right, that's we could probably go on all day for this, but we are going to wrap after this one, Stephen. But we should turn our attention to our backyard, and in particular your backyard, and talk about FC Edmonton and what this might mean for them in the near and long future. We know that they were at the Canadian Premier League meetings. That's on record now. What can you tell us about what this might mean for the Eddies?
Well, I think the fact that Tom Pfaff, the team's owner, and Tom, everyone knows in the Canadian soccer world that he plays things exceptionally close to the vest. And he'll be the first person to tell you that. The fact that he was willing to finally go on record just to say, I'm going to the meetings, even though I think a lot of people knew, FC Edmonton's been going to meetings for a while, that this is a huge sea change where, he's saying, like, at least, I am the Edmonton representative. Remember, this was a team that last year had openly said, we'll never go to the Canadian Premier League. And now, clearly, they're at the meetings, and they're clearly part of the process. Whether, they're not going to say here or there, and obviously now with them being named in the lawsuit, it's almost legally impossible for them to sort of declare a favorite. And in fact, that way, if anything, it might delay things if there is a move for, announcements to be made and plans to be made, because now FC Edmonton's named in this lawsuit against the USSF. So there's all sorts of balls in the air. The biggest issue for FC Edmonton, and I'm going to say hypothetically, let's say that the team is moving. If the team moves, let's say NASL doesn't play in 2018 and the Canadian Premier League doesn't play in 2018. What does FC Edmonton do? They're in a unique position because unlike other expansion teams, unlike Winnipeg and Hamilton, FC Edmonton's paying salaries. They have an academy. They have to pay people. They have players under contract. If they don't, Hamilton and Winnipeg are losing no money other than maybe one salary by waiting. Edmonton loses a lot of money by waiting. So 2018 becomes a huge question whether the league plays or not, or where they would play if there is no NASL and no Canadian Premier League in 2018. What is going to be the contingency for FC Edmonton? And this is where, I think some of the goodwill that Tom Pfaff has built, and I think if you talk to anyone in Canada soccer, Tom Pfaff has spoken about in the realm of a saint for the work he's done and the money he's thrown into trying to develop soccer in Canada. So I think maybe it's a little bit of payback time to find FC Edmonton a little bit of wiggle room for 2018. But that's going to be the $1 million question that's out there. If you may have a team that's attendance has shot upwards of 75% this year, to show again how little we care about the U.S. politics, that is finally building a stronger fan base, and all of a sudden has this potential of having to go dark, because going dark it's almost like folding and starting again. They got to find a place to play, and they've got to find a competitive league to be in. And obviously, as Tom Pfaff said too, USL is absolutely not an option for them. So they, basically, what are the options for them for 2018 if neither league plays? And that's going to be the $1 million question.
Stephen, I was told that amongst the attendees at the last meeting that the vast majority were suggesting a 19 start, but there was one voice that was pressing hard for an 18 start, and that was FC Edmonton for obvious reasons. And
and honestly, spring 2018, July is almost like not playing, because again, a lot of players that I've spoken to have said, if you start in July, we aren't going, because we'll get contracts somewhere else. We can't wait 8 or 9 months without a contract and wait to see if a Canadian Premier League happens. You start in the spring or not at all. That's been the message I've heard over and over from players around Canada. And that's an interesting conundrum that, you don't think about. But players saying, like, we don't make the kind of money where we can have 6 or 7 months off and without a paycheck. We got to go somewhere else then.
Yeah, well, who does, really, at any rate? All right, Stephen, 11.ca, anything you want to promote before we say goodbye?
No, I think the 11.ca is where you can read stuff, and I'm sure there'll be more on this legal rigmarole that's going to come out in the next week or two regarding NASL, and sometimes we actually write about soccer too, like actually people kicking a ball. But sometimes there's federation stuff too, and hopefully, honestly, I would love to see a future where we're talking more about things like the Toronto-Montreal rivalry rather than the future of leagues or the future of teams or the federation rules, because I think we could all deserve a break from it for like 100 years.
All right, Stephen Sandor, thanks again.
Thanks.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane, yesterday there was a Barcelona game, and I don't know what happened to Dembele. Is Dembele dead or something? Because I don't know. It was like, courage, Mbappe, courage, Usman, courage.
I'm wearing a shirt right now that says "Courage, Duane" because I stubbed my toe coming home from work last night. So so just pray for me, everyone. And I think I'll fight through it.
I just made one in the break, says "Courage" audio card that would explain the delay we had at the beginning of the show. But courage, damn, my beloved audio card.
All right, fair enough. I guess, Kevin, we could talk a little bit about what Steven just said there.
Well, you know what? I like the last thing you said too. Maybe we should talk about the Derby. Well, I don't really want to either, though, to be quite honest.
Yeah, well, we'll we try and keep these things under an hour nowadays because I know who has an hour to listen to us every day, but I barely have an hour to listen to us every day, and I'm here. Nonetheless. But real quickly on that, and my quick thoughts, and maybe we'll expand a little bit more on it tomorrow, and then we will focus a little bit on the field stuff now. But I've read the entire complaint. There are some interesting things in there. Yeah, believe it or not, I read the entire complaint at 1:30 in the morning last night. That's the type of dedication you get from Soccer Today. There are some interesting points out there about how the goalposts have moved. That is probably the most compelling things that you can see in that from an NASL perspective. There is some truth there. What Steven said about trying to push Miami and the Cosmos out, or at least their thinking out. I mean, because you look at guys like the Eddies, and they may be independent and they may value their independence, but they're still spending a fraction of what MLS teams do, and they're in no danger of trying to blow the doors out and make everyone, bankrupt. But I think that trying to push out those two sort of outliers, to use the word of the week, might be something that is of interest to certain parties within the USSF, within MLS. But the overall document reads like it's a manifesto from InfoWars or something at points. It's a bit conspiracy out there, and it's a bit too conspiracy out there for my liking. And I think, as Steven said, this is probably a ploy to force USSF to sort of back down on the D2 versus D3 stuff and just say, fine, you can be D2 for another year. But I don't know if it's the right approach, because who likes to feel like they're being taken hostage, really, right? Like, who does? And the only maybe leverage that the NASL might have here is that 2026 bid. But I think CONCACAF has enough of a relationship with FIFA, that the USSF within CONCACAF as well, that they could sort of go, come on, look, man, these guys are insane. Like, can we just let these guys spin their wheels till they peter out and not have it affect the bid? And I think maybe that might end up running the deal. Any thoughts on your end, Kevin?
Well, the patch situation, trying to just plug the respirator once again for another year, another two, or how much money, how much resources have to be wasted just to prove a point, or just to prove you're right or not, or just to create a splash? I don't know. And I think on both sides of this divide, there's way too many resources allocated to argue with each other. Think about the amount of cleats and balls and jerseys you can buy for youth kids with those wasted resources. That's how I look at it.
I think, and this just sort of occurred to me, and it's sort of an approach that kind of what Stephen was saying about what we do here in Canada, it might work down there if the politics and the egos can get out of the way, is to sanction them without a number, to say, look, we are recognizing that the NASL is a unique entity within American soccer. It is a sanctioned league, so the players aren't outlaws, so they can still go out and try and attract players and attract, sponsors in their market. That is not within the framework, which is not within the overall divisional pyramids of the league. It's a sanctioned professional league, period, end of story, and it can play in the USS Open Cup, or USSF Open Cup. The USSF, USOC is what I'm trying to say.
US Open Cup.
Yeah, the USSF Open Cup. That's not a thing. The US Open Cup.
The Lamar Hunt US Open Cup, and the final is tonight.
Yes, exactly. Maybe we'll move to that after this, after I finish my convoluted thought here, is that like in Canada, where they have the ability to compete in this open competition, which will then allow them access to the CONCACAF Champions League and ultimately, in theory, access to the World Club Cup Championship. That therefore includes them in the pyramid, but you're not putting a number on them. Some kind of creative solution like that, if the egos could get out of the way, might make everyone, I don't know if it would make the NASL necessarily happy, but it might make them be able to continue to do whatever the hell they want to do, whatever way they want to do it. If they want to run a 4-team league, they could. Those 4 teams can play in the US Open Cup. I think that's maybe your answer, but I don't know if the egos can get out of the way for that, Kevin.
Yeah, no, it will not end well. It will end with a lot of people yelling and a lot of people wasting money to sue other people, and then there'll be a countersuit, and then probably a countersuit.
And meanwhile, I think quietly what you'll also see is clubs like Indy 11 sort of slide out the side door and into USL, because that's at least, a little bit of sanity. North Carolina might follow them there. Follow the route that Tampa Bay did.
So to not be me, not that I don't agree with you, that would be more sanity, but just to be fair, it would be at least stability.
Yeah, well, stability is what I meant by that, and it's unfortunate. I look at Indy 11. I think are probably the biggest victims of all the Indy 11 fans, because it is a great fan base. It is a good success story in Indianapolis, a market that probably is never going to see MLS, despite the fact that they do have an expansion bid on the table right now. It just doesn't seem like it's big enough, or it has enough of a. Just when you look at the other markets, it's just. They're all a little bit higher up in the pecking order right now. So this is probably the highest level they're going to achieve. And it's a shame to have them that taken away from them. But hopefully they see the light and are managed to escape what their wits about them. All right, Kevin, let's move past this and get on and talk about kicking the balls, as Steven said. Do you want to talk about the Derby quick first, or do you want to start with US Open?
We might as well finish it like the Band-Aid. Just rip it off. Tonight, 7:30 Eastern Time at BMO Field, Toronto FC receives the Montreal Impact. 6 games remaining for the Montreal Impact. Desperate need of points. 4 wins would give them 50% plus chance of making the playoff if other results go their way, but that's 4 wins out of 6, and they just lost 4. So, yeah.
Yeah, it starts tonight. 2 games against Toronto left to get this done. And
NYCFC and Atlanta.
As I said yesterday, if Montreal does make the playoffs from here, they will be full measure for it, and they will be dangerous because they have just beaten, all of the contenders in the East in short order. Basically, that's exactly what's in front of them. If you poll people on what the most likely Eastern champions are, it's going to be Toronto, NYCFC, and Atlanta in some order. Probably Toronto first, and then flip whatever 2 they want from around there. So if they manage to do that, then hats off to them. Maybe, I don't know. Let me ask you this real quickly, and then I don't know what more to break this down in terms of handicap from Toronto's perspective.
There will be players missing for TFC, but it's in a precautionary measure, and why risk it?
Yeah, well, I mean, they pretty much have the Shield wrapped up. I mean, we've said this for weeks. It's a 99% chance they're going to win the Shield. They would probably need to lose all 5 of their games, and even if they did that, they would probably still win the Shield. They're 11 points back. I mean, maybe New York reins them in at that point, but it would be quite the remarkable finish for them too. So, they can afford a draw is what I'm saying here. I don't think they want that. I think they want to prove themselves every night out. I think they really would desperately, as much as they're going to downplay it in the media, like to get 70 points this season to really put a marker down that might last a very long time, as I think this probably will be the only year that it seems unlikely that Toronto will be able to dominate this way again next year, or any club in the near future, simply because there are more clubs coming in. You look at LAFC and kind of the initiative they seem to have there. You look at Atlanta and the way they've done this in 1 year. You look at what NYCFC has done in recent years, and you suggest that these clubs are going to start to close that gap a little bit. So you won't probably see a season like this anytime soon again. So I think to put down a 70-plus season, good chance that might last for generation as the best season ever. And I think that that's something that's probably important to them and will motivate them down the stretch now that the Shield is pretty much done and dusted. So they're going to want to win, but at the same time, Greg Vanney and the management can afford to manage the roster in such a way to set them up for that third of the treble, the third trophy, and the most important trophy, the MLS Cup, to have them set up fine for that, which is ultimately, I think, what Toronto fans have to realize is the most important thing down the stretch, even if that does involve dropping points to Montreal, which they don't want to do. So I don't know. We'll see what happens tonight. Let me ask you this question quickly before we move to the U.S. Open Cup, though, Kevin. Do you think Montreal fans would take some degree of solace if they played a bit of a spoiler by taking a point off TFC tonight? Would that be considered a victory for Montreal fans, or are they just so angry right now that it's win or bust?
Well, it depends what you consider a victory, because in some fans' mind, there's a possibility of playoff. Montreal is the first team technically outside of the playoff, so you would think, oh, there's a chance. But with the Red Bulls draw on Sunday against Philly, got 6 points. They rested some players, yes. They got 6 points gap between New York and Montreal. And then there's Atlanta and Columbus, and it becomes really, really difficult to just think about even being there. So tonight, yeah, you could think about it later on in the season, like in the next few weeks. Oh, yeah, we got a result in Toronto. Not a lot of teams did that. Toronto 6-game winning streak right now. But for me, for the future, for this club, it's already a difficult position. Montreal needs to, like with the gains they made last year with the East Conference final run, you do have expectations that have risen. And the reaction of the club to those higher expectations hasn't been good enough all season long and throughout the club itself. So tonight, in my opinion, won't change anything. And if it's a victory for Montreal and 3 points, it will just delay the inevitable, in my mind, where it's Montreal doesn't make the playoff.
All right, so it's win or bust, basically, if you're thinking about playoffs.
In the words of Kurt Larson in the Toronto Sun this morning, it's an all-or-nothing situation.
So they will play in desperate. It could be a good game that way. And look, we'll say this. It is hard to sort of get pumped up about this one, simply because the gap in the points and sort of the gap in the points, not just between Toronto and Montreal, but between Toronto and everyone right now, makes it not seem as important, because this Shield, as I said, is wrapped up for all intents and purposes. So there's no sort of intensity for that. There's just kind of a long wait until, maybe you get the record for points, which is a nice little thing, but still at the same time kind of a secondary prize. It's all about, waiting those 6 weeks out to get the playoffs going right now for TFC fans in many ways. But I'm sure the celebration for the Shield will be fun. I'm right now saying this as I'm staring at my I support the Shield flag or scarf that's up on my wall. So I am looking forward to that. But at the same time, there's a bit of an anticlimacticness to the actual clinching of it, which could happen as early as Saturday. It's funny, though, that the TFC's playing so well that no one's even mentioning that if they win tonight, they will actually break the modern record, or tie the modern record for consecutive wins in an MLS season. So 7 in a row would be the situation tonight, and undefeated since Canada Day, which I guess maybe is that irony that they last lost on Canada Day, the Canadian team. I don't know. Maybe it is.
Yeah, that's for coincidence, irony. But yeah, so I'm pretty sure that it's going to be a difficult game for Impact fans to watch tonight. At the edge of their seat, a loss will just solidify the very small probabilities of Montreal making the playoff. Duane, tonight, though, there's a cup at stake. There's the U.S. Open Cup, the Laramee Trophy. that's going to be handed to the winner of the New York Red Bulls Sporting Kansas City final.
Precisely. And look, you mentioned a minute ago that New York has really put a lot of stock in this. This is an interesting sort of history with the Red Bulls and the U.S. Open Cup through the years. It's been a bane of contention with their fan base that the team management has consistently prioritized the league over the cup, has played basically reserve teams over the years. They bailed out early. They've been upset by smaller teams. This has just kind of been something that, and keep in mind the Red Bulls or Metro Stars have been competing for this damn thing for 20 years now and never won it. So their fans are very excited tonight to have an opportunity to finally win the trophy that in some ways their hardcore fan wanted most of all, although I'm sure the MLS Cup is probably still number one in most people's minds. But a lot of people look at this and look at this as sort of something that they should have been trying to compete for years. So a lot of frustration there. And Jesse Marsch has prioritized this, has really put a lot of stock in this competition, has looked at it as an opportunity to, qualify for the Champions League spot. That's on the line as well. We should mention that. And they rested players. They rested Question on the weekend. They've really put a lot of priority in this, but they're on the road in SKC, which is a damn good team. And I have trouble seeing the Red Bulls, for as much as they've tried to prioritize this, as much as it would matter to their fans, I have trouble seeing SKC not winning this one just based on their form at home and sort of their home advantage and kind of their solid defensive play. This, I think, is going to be a low-scoring one for that very reason, and I think I'm going to give the slight nod in my mind to Kansas City simply because they are at home.
Fair enough. I do believe with the rest of New York Red Bulls, 5 players I think were rested in the weekend, something like that. I think they have a shot. But yes, Kansas City has been successful in that tournament in recent years, have found it useful to find a path to the Champions League. Tonight could be another one of those nights where a little defensive, a little, well, it's a final, right? Finals are never necessarily the best game because there's so much at stake that the pressure...
They're cagey.
Yeah, they're cagey. There's pressure on the shoulders of the player to not commit that mistake instead of making a great play. And those are two different things. When you play with fear, usually you're a fraction of a second of hesitation because you don't want to make a bad move and you get burned and you actually do the one thing you don't want to do. So tonight, that's why finals always fascinates me, Duane. It's not just about the game. It's about the pressure and the magnifying glass on every play, which will be the play that cost them that tournament, right? Because that's what we think about. That's what we remember. Not just the winner, the scapegoat. Nobody wants to be that scapegoat. That's the pressure every player will feel tonight.
Yeah, precisely. Finals are fun, though, nonetheless, and especially fun if you're out there. So if you're a Red Bulls fan or an SKC fan listening to this, enjoy your night. Kevin and Kevin will try and enjoy his night. He's not coming to Toronto for this one midweek and all that sort of jazz. I will attempt to enjoy.
Midweek and have to choose your battle.
Yes, exactly. I'll be at the stadium as usual, so I will enjoy it. And as I said earlier, it's always been a fun night when Montreal and Toronto have played recently, even if the stakes right now aren't quite as high or don't seem quite as high as, well, they aren't as high. They aren't close to as high as they were the last 2 times they played at BMO Field, which had a cup on the line, as we just mentioned, and had a cup on the line back in the last winter. So exactly. All right, Kevin, any final thoughts on the day?
No, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back tomorrow morning with another edition of Soccer Today, talking about tonight's action and much, much more. And as always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.